Ahoy! On this video, I'm going to be turning myself into Pennywise, the 2017 movie, and I'm going to recap the movie as I do so. Just to mention, there will be a lot of spoilers if you haven't already seen it with Bill Skarsgård, not Tim Curry. Did that one last time. Let's get started. So, it was released in 2017, and just in case you weren't aware of it, it changes into the form of the fear. It mostly takes the form of the clown. So the movie takes place in 1988. Bill, as we all know, is Georgie's brother, older brother. He makes a boat for Georgie, and he tells Georgie to go get the wax glue thing from the cellar, and Georgie goes to get it, terrified for his life because he's going into the cellar. He goes gets the wax, brings it back up to Bill. Bill paints the boat with the wax and tells him to be careful and to go out and play because he's sick, even though he really wasn't sick, he just didn't want to play. So Georgie goes out and he ends up losing the boat because it falls in to the sewer. And in the sewer he finds Pennywise. And Pennywise knows his name, which was creepy. He's a kid, again. So, there's this lady though. While this movie is going on, I noticed there's an old lady with her cat. And she watches Georgie talking into the sewer. Doesn't bother to be like, hey man, what are you doing? No. We don't talk about that. George starts talking to Pennywise, telling him that, Bill's gonna kill him if he doesn't get his boat back. And Pennywise is, just like, this is food. Pennywise drags Georgie into the sewer and, eats him. This lady with a cat that I mentioned earlier sees a bunch of blood on the floor. It doesn't say anything still. This lady is a lady that we have to worry about. So that summer, Bill, Richie, Eddie, and Stan traveled to where Georgie's body probably ended up. So it's at the end of the sewer type thing. But they're kind of just talking about it. They're at the school, just oh well, maybe he ended up here. We see Betty Ribson's mom. She goes to the school every day, trying to make sure that her daughter comes back. But she's dead. She's not coming back. Sadly, I feel for her. That's very sad. So Ben and Beverly end up meeting. They find each other while they're walking out, and she's telling them the Bowers are on that side, so you might want to be careful. And she realizes that he's new, so she signs his yearbook and continues on with her life. In the garage of Billy's house, Billy has already did this kind of science experiment thing that leads him to a certain area of the sewer that Georgie may have ended up. His dad gets mad, starts yelling at him, telling him to take it all down. Before his mother sees it, so he ends up taking it all down. He believes Georgie's still alive, but nobody else does. So he's having an issue. Mike has his first encounter with Pennywise in front of in form of hands coming out of like the meat locker type thing, because he works at a meat locker. Kind of. He doesn't work at a meat locker, or I think he does. I'm not too sure. But I think he delivers meat to a meat locker. But he sees like hands coming out of the, like burned hands coming out of the meat locker. And then the door like swings open. Pennywise is just standing there basically tormenting him. And then Stan sees it in a form of a lady that he's afraid of. There's a picture of her in the church that he's at, because he's practicing for his bat mitzvah. And then the lady comes to life and like he freaks out. Then Ben's in the library, you know, trying to get information on Derry and what's going on, since he just moved there and he's the new kid. Oh, I forgot to mention Mike is homeschooled. Ben has an encounter with it too. He's in the library and he's reading up on Derry's history, and then this balloon, he like follows this balloon down to like this secret part of the library, and there's like this guy dressed in like army clothes without a head like following him, and he runs out of there. Ben ends up getting bullied by Henry, and Henry and his little crew go to find him in the sewers, but they have an encounter with Pennywise instead, or at least one of the members of his little group has an encounter with Pennywise and ends up dying there. They go to the pharmacy, they find Beverly, and she helps him get some supplies for Ben that's now bleeding. And then she follows them to the alley. She sees that it's Ben, and she asks if he's okay, and they continue to patch him up. While they're all going back home, Eddie ends up having an encounter with it and the leper on Nebolt Street. That's where the abandoned house is. At this point, they all end up together again and realize that they've all had an encounter with Pennywise by now. It comes around every 27 years in this movie, so they realize that it's been 27 years since the first murder because of Ben. We all know that it lives in the sewers, hence the abandoned home on Nebolt Street. That's where the well is that basically leads to the middle of the sewer. Beverly has the bloody bathroom scene. Bill ends up, encountering Pennywise through his cellar. He sees Georgie, he tries to help Georgie, but, he finds out that it's it in form of Georgie. They end up meeting Mike as he's having an encounter with it, like he's getting beat up by Henry Bowers, and he sees, like, Pennywise in the corner, like, waving with one of the dead kid's hands. They end up going to like this festival thing, and that's when they start talking about like everyone's encounter, and that's when Mike tells them the story about how his parents died. They go into the house to fight it and stuff, and Eddie ends up breaking his arm. Bill and Richie end up having like this big fight. So they all kind of go their own way for a while. While this is going on, Bowers decides to kill his dad. Beverly, she gets like sexually abused by her dad, and while this is about to happen, she ends up grabbing the toilet top thing and smashing it against his head. And after that, Pennywise shows up and takes her. So the Losers Club end up going back to the house to defeat Pennywise for the second time, because now they have Beverly. And Beverly has seen the deadlight, so she's kind of like in a trance. And Henry goes insane and goes to the house to, try to defeat the Losers Club, and he ends up falling down the well to his death. The Losers Club end up climbing down, and Pennywise introduces himself as the dancing clown. He starts doing a little dance. All the bodies taken by it are now in this like weird kind of like tower thing, and some of them are like floating around it. Ben sees Beverly, kisses her, and she snaps out of it. Bill sees Georgie and realizes it's it, so he shoots him. Bill then gets taken hostage, and Richie is like, you've done this to me, you hit me, you did this, you did that, but I'm not gonna let you die. Pennywise explains that he will spare their lives if they let him meet Bill. And they all end up, yelling at him. And they're like, you're not gonna take Bill, you're not gonna eat Bill. They all start fighting him. They defeat it. Like, he ends up having like a scar here, and it kind of like explodes because now he's scared. So now that Pennywise has fear, it's a whole different story. Pennywise kind of like slithers back into like whatever he's in. Beverly explains that when she saw the deadlights, she saw that they're all gonna be adults when it comes again, and she basically sees each and every one of them die. They make a blood oath. Well, Bill initiates it, that if it returns, they return too. And then everyone kind of goes their separate ways, and Bill and Beverly talk about Bill and Beverly end up talking about how she's moving to Portland, and he reveals his feelings for her, and then they have a kiss, and that's how chapter 1 ends. Alright, so now it's chapter 2. Starts off 27 years later. Well, no, it starts off with Bev talking about how she's seen all of them older, and they start asking like how they were gonna look and stuff, and she's just explaining everything. Then there's like a carnival going on. There's this couple, and Adrian, he is playing the like horse games that you shoot like the water and the horse keeps moving. And there's this little girl named Victoria, and she's got like this birthmark, and he wins, and he's like, hey, you want this little girl? And she just kind of looks at him, and then he whispers in her ear, thanks for letting me win. I thought that was really cute. That's something I would do. A homophobic group of people, they beat up the couple, and they throw Adrian off the bridge, and it ends up finding Adrian, and he eats him right in front of the other guy. And we find out then that Mike still lives in Derry, and Bill is now directing movies, but everybody hates his endings. And Richie is a comedian, Eddie's a risk analyst, Ben ended up becoming an architect. Stanley, we don't really know what Stanley ends up being. He's doing like a puzzle in the living room talking about going on a trip if his job lets him. But they don't really say what his job is. Beverly ends up owning a clothing company with her abusive husband. Comes back to life. We see Henry Bowers kind of at the bottom of the sewer. He kind of comes back to life. And then we see him kind of like walking back to his house where there's a bunch of cops and they're taking his dad in an ambulance and everything because he killed his dad. And then they get him arrested and sent to an asylum. And then we see him kind of like look out the window and there's a balloon. So they take him back to his room because he starts acting a fool. And the balloon ends up like under the bed, so he pops it and it's his friend Victor with his switchblade. And he basically gets advised to go kill the Losers Club. Ben ends up getting all of the Losers Club to meet up at Jade Orient, which is like a Chinese buffet type thing. They're all talking about like how they got married or how their career's going and stuff, and Mike starts to explain to them how they were all called in because it came back, like it was an echo, and the echo is now back. And it comes around every 27 years, and it's been 27 years since they've left Derry, and they all basically start telling him how they don't want to hear it, how, you know, they made a pact a long time ago, it shouldn't matter now, and they all get pretty pissed. So the fortune cookies end up spelling out, guess Stanley couldn't cut it. Then one of them turns into a dead baby bird, the other one turns into an eyeball, one of them's like a baby head on a weird fly body, or bee. It's like a bug. And one of them stays in the fortune cookie but has like a bat wing and it's like flying around, and they all basically lose their shit and start beating the table up. And then a boy asks Richie for his autograph, and Richie kind of loses it. He starts to tell the boy off, and Stanley kills himself. And it cuts out to like this baseball game, and we see Victoria again, this little girl that has the birth mark. And her mom's basically telling her like, hey, you know, we just paid to see a baseball game, so we're gonna sit here and we're gonna watch this baseball game. And she's like, you know, I don't particularly want to watch this. And she decides to like wander off because she sees like this firefly, and she ends up wandering off to the bottom of the bleachers, and there she sees Pennywise, and Pennywise is like, hello. Pennywise is letting her know that she doesn't have to worry about the little scar that's on her face that people make fun of him too because of his face. And he's like, oh, just come here, I'll blow that right off of your face. And, you know, she's a little girl, even though she clearly was like, you know, I was told not to talk to strangers. But apparently, Pennywise is not a stranger. He's the dancing clown. So, joke's on you. And he eats her. And then it cuts off to a scene where Henry Bowers is breaking out of his mental institution. And then we get back to the losers, and everyone wants to leave. They're kind of done with Mike at this point. And Mike is like, Bill, you know, you gotta see this, come with me. And Bill's like, well, what makes you think that I? And he's like, you know, they're gonna listen to you, they don't listen to me. They've always listened to you. Okay, so Bill goes with Mike to the library. Mike gives him some water and shows him an 18th century artifact that he stole from a native. Then he tells Bill the story of holy men, or the Chacopiwa tribe? Not too sure. They fed him something, they fed him like a root that made him see how like it arrived on Earth. And the water that he gave Bill was the root. So it showed Bill how it transformed and how to stop it. He like goes into detail. Anyway, so he goes into detail on how this tribe ended up in Derry to begin with, or not the tribe, but how it appeared himself to the tribe in a certain way. So they realized that he transforms because of the fact that he kind of like showed himself as a like vulture type thing, and then it turned into like a monster with horns, and he was just like this tar looking animal that later turns into the clown we all know and love today. Well, that I know and love today. He ends up showing him the artifact, telling him that the water was. Bev ends up telling them all how she saw them all die when they all went back to like this hotel thing that they were in. And Richie's like, how come she's the only one that can see the future? And they all explain to Richie how, you know, she saw the deadlights. Not all of them did. Then they all end up going to the clubhouse that Ben ended up building for them back in the first movie, but we don't really see him build it. Mike explains that they have to find tokens from the part of the movie where they just kind of stopped talking and they kind of went their own ways, because these are the tokens that are going to bring them together. These are the tokens that they have to kind of throw in this artifact to defeat it. So Beverly ends up visiting her old house, and she finds this lady there. This lady's like, oh, let me bake you cookies, let me make you tea. And she's like, no. She's like, man, if you don't sit down and eat this shit that I'm giving to you, we're gonna have a problem. So Beverly's like, oh, alright then. So she decides to stay a little bit, and while she's staying, well, I mean, she didn't really have a choice but to stay. She starts looking at all the pictures on the wall, and she was like, oh, you know, your dad, how's your dad doing and everything? And she's like, oh, my dad never ended up needing handouts from this place, and he did it all on his own, and when he couldn't do it anymore, you know what he did? And she was like, oh, what was it? She's like, he joined the circus. And she realizes that that's Pennywise's daughter. So she's in the wrong house at the wrong time. So while she's running out, because she's freaking out like, holy crap, you know, this is Pennywise's daughter, she turns around and realizes that this house is an abandoned house. So she just went in an abandoned house, and she found the letter, or the postcard, with the poem on it that Ben wrote, that she thinks is Bill at this point. Even though clearly in the first movie, we found out that she knew that it was Ben that wrote it, not Bill. But since everybody lost their mind, here we are. Richie goes to the arcade to find a token from back when he was playing with Street Fighter with Henry Bauer's cousin, and Henry Bauer's cousin tried to act cool when Henry Bauer's came around. And I don't know why I'm saying his whole name. When Bowers came around, and insert gay slur here. Then he has an encounter with Pennywise again. The first time, the big statue guy came to life and tried to like kill him. This time, Pennywise is sitting on the top of the statue, and he's like, "Oh, I know your secret," and which he really does because nobody else knew. I'll get to that. He sees a flyer with his name on it. In the first movie, he also saw a flyer with his name on it, saying, you know, here lies, or, you know, like, Richie Tozer died this day, blah blah blah. Eddie visits the pharmacy where he couldn't save his mom. Apparently his mom was stuck in the basement, like tied, and the leper was like on the other side, and he could not for the life of him save his mom. He ended up running away because he was so afraid of the germs and stuff that he couldn't even save his own mother. So he kind of like ran off, and the leper was still there. So when he goes in there to get his inhaler. His inhaler is the token that he's going to put in this artifact. And he hears like his mom calling him again. So he goes inside of the like basement, I want to say. That's where his mom was. And he sees the leper, and this time he ends up like strangling the leper to death, and he gets thrown up on. It's disgusting. Bill ends up getting his bike from this antique shop that Stephen King works at. So he does like a Stanley cameo type thing. It's kind of cool. There he tells him that like he hates his endings. And Bill's not having it. He rides past his house, or his old house, and he sees a little boy from the restaurant, and tells him like if he's hearing voices from the sewer not to acknowledge it. And the boy tells him that he's hearing voices from the sink, and he's like, please, 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 just be careful, there's, you know, a killer clown. And the kid thinks that he is completely insane. I mean, he was talking to a sewer right before he rode past him. And he ends up getting Georgie's boat from the sewer, where he gets like he goes to put his hand in the sewer, and a bunch of little tiny hands start grabbing him. Ben goes into the school, and he has like a little encounter with it, and it is like dressed as Beverly, and she's like on fire. And he kept this page from the yearbook that has Beverly's name on it because she was the only one that signed it. Mike ends up getting the rock from back when he was getting beat by Bowers, and it's the rock that Beverly hit Bowers with, so it still had like the blood from that moment. Then back at the house that they were staying in, Billy ended up leaving to save the kid because he found out that it has the kid. And then Richie left and ended up by that church that Stanley had his bat mitzvah. And Eddie ends up getting stabbed by Henry in the cheek. And then Eddie stabs Henry. And Henry jumps out the window. But he doesn't die yet. Then it cuts to a scene where Billy's trying to help the kid that he just ranted about in the other scene. And he can't save him, so Pennywise ends up eating him. We find out that when Mike was little, his parents died in that fire that he was talking about in the first movie. Bowers tries to kill Mike, and Richie ends up saving him. And after he saves him, throws up. Richie does a lot of throwing up in this movie. They go back to the house. Bill tries to kill it alone, but they all are like, "Come on, man, you can't do this." So they all end up, in the house with him. When they enter the house, Ben's stomach starts like hurting, like he's getting burned or something. Come to find out, Pennywise is carving "Home at Last" on his stomach. Then Stanley is in the fridge, and he comes out and starts growing legs from his head. It's such a scene. This thing tries to kill Richie, and Eddie's like in this corner, terrified out of his mind. So Bill's like, you gotta grab the knife, help me out here, and he can't because he's so scared. And he tries to tell him that, and Bill's like, you can't feed him fear. If you feed him fear, that's how he gets us. And this just happens. I mean, they barely entered the house. Like, they just opened the door and all this crap is going on. They go into the well that ends up in the sewer. Gray water. Pennywise's daughter comes out and she grabs Beverly and she's like, "Time to sink." She obviously didn't get the memo that it's time to float. Okay. Beverly ends up giving Eddie the staff that she finds outside and tells him, this kills monsters, and he puts that in his mind. Pennywise is light, so they need to find a way to snuff out the light with darkness. So they throw all these things that they found when they were all alone, the little tokens, they put it inside of the artifact, and they start chanting "Turn light into dark," and basically summon Pennywise. That's when Pennywise comes in, and he's like, "Oh, you didn't tell him, Mike, huh? You didn't show him the other side of the artifact that says that they all died." And, Bill's like, "What, you lied to us again?" And, then turns into this huge spider-like clown and basically terrorizes him. Beverly ends up in a bloody bathroom. Like, there's blood all over the stall, and it's just filling. And then Ben ends up in the clubhouse, but the clubhouse is now all full of dirt, and he's trying to go out, and he starts reciting the poem that's on the postcard, and Beverly's like, "Ben," and they kind of help each other out and end up back in the sewer. Richie and Eddie are at the doors that are like scary, not scary, or it's scary, very scary, not scary at all. And They try to go through the doors, but you know, it doesn't end up very well. Billy ends up at a basement with Georgie again, and Georgie's like yelling at him, "You lied and I died." And he ends up basically killing the younger version of himself, basically symbolizing that the guilt doesn't have to last forever, because he felt really guilty that Georgie died. Richie sees the deadlights. Eddie tries to save him and stabs it. Like, he throws the spear through his mouth and kind of paralyzes him for like a split second. Not too long. He ends up getting stabbed straight through the stomach by its little spider leg. Eddie tells Richie a "your mom" joke, just like Richie used to do to Eddie all the time. And after that, he sadly dies. They all start yelling awful things to Pennywise, like he's never gonna do anything in life, and he's just a stupid clown, and that they're not scared of him. You know, they bullied the crap out of him. Then he ended up shrinking. Then they take his heart out of his chest and they crush it, and Pennywise is no more. Richie has a breakdown because Eddie dies. The house ends up demolishing itself. They all end up in a water that's kind of dirty, but they're all washing themselves out, and Eddie wouldn't have liked it, but Richie is like really sad, and he starts crying, and he ends up losing his glasses. Ben and Beverly find the glasses, but they kiss before they bring it up to him, so they end up together. They go back to town and back to their lives. Ben and Beverly end up staying together, and I don't know if they get married or not on this one. I know in the like very, very first movie, they end up Mike ends up calling everybody and basically telling them thanks for everything, and like if they want to keep in contact they can, but he's moving out of Derry finally. And to read Stanley's oh, I forgot to mention that putting all their artifacts in, they took a shower cap from the clubhouse for Stanley and they threw it in with all the artifacts. They couldn't forget about Stan. Stan sends everybody a letter. They end up reading the letter. Stan's basically like, you know, I'm sorry that I did what I did, but I eliminated myself because I was the weakest, and you guys could do it without me. If you're reading this letter, obviously you guys made it. If you're not, then we all know what happened. Basically like a little goodbye card, but at the same time it was like a clarity that it would have gone differently if Stan was there, because Stan was indeed the weakest link, and it's kind of sad. And then we find out that Richie was in love with Eddie, and that's very sad because he didn't even get to like confess his love to him. But that's my recap for today. That's It Chapter 1 and It Chapter 2, the Bill Skarsgård version, not the Tim Curry version. I hope you guys enjoyed this little recap. This one's a little longer than the first one because there's a lot more stuff I had to like pack in here. This is my makeup. If you haven't watched the movie, watch the movie. It's really good, or at least in my opinion is really good. I like the original 1990. Sorry this one took too long. I could not for the life of me figure out how to do the second movie because I've seen it, but I couldn't find it. So, it's really difficult for me to watch it and have notes on it if couldn't see it again. I absolutely love this movie. I love the second one way more than the first one though, but that's just because I feel like the second one has a lot more detail. Bill Skarsgård does an amazing portrayal of Pennywise, just like Tim Curry in the first one had an amazing portrayal of Pennywise. So, hope you guys enjoyed this. Like, comment, subscribe. Ahoy!